September 16th, 1994 was a clear Friday morning in Rua, Zimbabwe. And for the students at Ariel School, an exclusive private institution catering to Zimbabwe's elite, it promised to be just another day of lessons and play. Kind of like that. But this wasn't just another day. This was the day 62 children aged between 6 and 12 claimed something extraordinary unfolded during their morning break. An event that would ignite debate among UFO researchers, psychiatrists, and skeptics for decades, with echoes of the event still resonating today. For example, I'm talking about it on YouTube right now. Now, I do like aliens a lot, but I'm not here to definitively tell you that these children saw aliens. I'm simply talking about the sheer number of witnesses and the enduring accounts, and how that situation raises some deeply fascinating questions and, in my opinion, creates the most compelling alien story that exists. So what happens when dozens of children from diverse backgrounds within the school all report seeing the same seemingly impossible thing? What if they maintain their core story with remarkable consistency for nearly 30 years? And then also, what if the details of their alleged encounter challenge our very understanding of reality? Welcome back to the Oompaville channel, my friends. Today we're talking about the Ariel School incident.
Hundreds of people today phoned the ZBC and the BBC correspondent in Harare saying they sighted an unidentified flying object last night.
We're delving into perhaps the most compelling and unsettling mass UFO sighting in history. A case that even seasoned BBC correspondent Tim Leach, a man who had covered war zones, found profoundly disturbing. He admitted, "I could handle war zones, but I could not handle this." That's my opinion, what his voice sounded like. So, to truly grasp the Ariel School incident, we need to step back to Zimbabwe in 1994. The nation was still relatively young, having gained independence from British colonial rule just 14 years earlier. It was a country finding its identity on the world stage and transitioning from its past as Rhodesia. Rua, the town that this took place in at the time, was a small agricultural center located about 22 kilometers southeast of the capital, Harare. While not yet formally established as a town, it was an established agricultural community with some local infrastructure. For example, a school. And said school stood in contrast to its rural surroundings. It was an expensive private school, primarily serving the children of wealthy white families from Harare. This demographic fact is important and significant to the story because they were likely exposed to Western media, including science fiction that featured aliens and UFOs, kind of like this and this. And that movie that with Jack Nicholson that scared the shit out of me as a kid. I saw him blow people up and they disappeared and I got so scared. Help! So with that in mind, they were also children growing up in a nation rich with its own indigenous folklore and traditions, which created a very unique cultural tapestry of what kind of goes on in people's minds when they're exposed to myths versus what they actually see and how they interpret things. Crucially, the Ariel School incident did not occur in a vacuum. The preceding days had seen a flurry of unusual activity in the skies over southern Africa.
On September 14th, 1994, something flashed through the sky in southern Africa, alarming a few and confounding.
So our story starts on September 14th, 1994, that normal Friday morning. This is 2 days before the Ariel event. Many termed this time frame a UFO wave that swept the region.
There has been much excitement after hundreds of people reported seeing a mysterious bright object.
Numerous people across Zimbabwe and neighboring countries reported seeing strange lights, fireballs, and objects moving in unconventional ways, like this. Is this normal? Should I be able to pull my shoulder out of socket? Is that normal? The ZBC, aka the Zimbabwean Broadcasting Corporation Radio, even issued a public call for listeners to phone in with their sightings, and the response was overwhelming. Most described a bright, silent fireball traversing the night sky, sometimes trailing sparks or breaking into smaller pieces. Skeptics for this time do offer a terrestrial explanation. Skeptics, by the way, I like to call them losers. According to famous skeptic Brian Dunning, the spectacular light show was likely the re-entry of the Zenit 2 rocket from the Cosmos 2290 satellite launch. Whatever the fuck that means, I don't know. And guess what? I don't care. It was absolutely aliens. Whether or not it was a re-entering rocket or something otherworldly, one thing is clear. By September 16th, 1994, a palpable sense of UFO excitement, or perhaps UFO mania, as some termed it, permeated Zimbabwe. People were looking skyward. and the discussion of strange lights and the notion of otherworldly visitors was very much alive in the public consciousness. Before we get into the event itself, in the days leading up to the Ariel School event, Cynthia Hind, who is one of Africa's most distinguished UFO researchers, was already actively investigating multiple reports from the recent wave of sightings, including a daylight sighting by a young boy and his mother, and a truck driver's claim of encountering alien beings on a remote road, aka lot lizards, all right? It's all important context though, because it was against this backdrop of heightened awareness, curiosity, and perhaps a touch of apprehension that the children of Ariel School began their day on that fateful Friday morning. These poor children had no idea that their mid-morning break, their snack time, their baby recess would catapult them and their small school into the annals of UFO history, the annals. Annals, I don't know, the cockles of your heart. So what exactly did the children see? Around 10 a.m. on September 16th, 1994, the teachers at Ariel School were gathered for a meeting inside the main building, and outside approximately 62 children aged between 6 and 12 were enjoying their mid-morning recess. Mid-morning recess? How much recess do you get? So the kids had no direct adult supervision on the playground, with the adults inside, and some of the kids were scattered around playing. Some others were at the tuck shop buying snacks, which if you don't know, that's a little shop that you can buy things at on a school ground. I didn't know what the f that was until researching this video. It was then that someone, or perhaps several children simultaneously, noticed something unusual in the sky. The kids saw one or more silver disc-shaped objects, and they weren't lights or distant specks. They were described as defined craft by the children. They didn't just pass by. The kids reported that these silver discs descended, ultimately landing in a scrubby field of brush and small trees bordering the school property, an area the children were forbidden to enter but could clearly see. It was the alien containment zone. Now, if the story had just ended there with a strange craft landing near a school playground, it could have been remarkable enough with just that, but what the children claimed happened next elevates the Ariel School incident into a category of its own. From the landed craft, many children reported beings emerging. The descriptions of these beings were strikingly consistent. Small figures between 1 and 4 feet tall, clad entirely in black, form-fitting attire. Very modern, very contemporary. Their most prominent features, almost universally described, were their unusually large, dark eyes and their green skin, and their silver craft. It's the holy relic! Ah! Sorry. Some accounts also mentioned long, beautiful dark hair, which I thought was hilarious and odd, but understandably, panic erupted and many of the younger children screamed and fled because they're pussies. But a number of the older students, driven by curiosity or perhaps a strange sense of calm, remained and watched the beings. This is where our old BBC buddy Tim Leach comes in. One student was interviewed by him just days later. The kid recounted, "We saw something silvery in the trees, like a disc. Then we saw 2 beings dressed in black, very modern, very contemporary. They had big eyes, and one came towards us. Everyone started running and screaming, a little bit like this." I'm really sorry. I'm sorry for casually interrupting this beautiful story. I apologize. Press the like button and I'll never do it again. So the kids that stayed and observed the beings claimed something even more extraordinary. They claimed the being or beings, I assume it's beings at this point, approached them and communicated with them. But this communication, however, was not verbal. It was probably something like this. According to many of the children's accounts, particularly those gathered by Harvard psychiatrist Dr. John Mack 2 months after the event, the messages were conveyed telepathically directly into their minds, like in Independence Day. Excellent movie, by the way. Just watched it. The president in that movie sounds just like Trump. Don't believe me? Watch his speech. "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He died like a dog. The aliens, the fat lady, she's singing." Now, the content of these telepathic messages is where things get deeply unsettling. The children reported receiving warnings about humanity's destructive impact on the environment and the dangers of unchecked technological advancement. These were liberal aliens for sure. One 5th grader told Dr. Mack that he was warned about something that's going to happen and that pollution mustn't be. Another 11-year-old girl shared with Mac, I think they want people to know that we're actually making harm on this world and we mustn't get too technologued. Another child recalled being told the world would end because humans were failing to care for the planet. So these were ecologically aware aliens, apparently. It's important to note that these telepathic environmental messages were primarily reported during Dr. Mac's interviews, which were conducted 2 months after the event, and they were not prominently featured in the initial reports to Cynthia Hind, the ufologist, or Tim Leach, aka Mr. BBC. The entire encounter, from the object's appearance to the departure, lasted approximately 15 minutes. After this, the beings returned to their craft, ascended silently, and then vanished. And when the children, many still shaken and tearful and scared and screaming, "Ah!" When they returned to their classrooms and tried to tell their teachers what they had seen, they were largely dismissed.
There was a man, and he walked towards us and he walked back again.
And what does he look like?
His face was like this, and his eyes were down here.
The school faculty, having been in their meeting, had witnessed nothing at all out of the ordinary. They were total losers. To them, it sounded like a collective fantasy or the product of a child's overactive imagination.
And then we saw something shiny, and we saw two people. They were in tight black suit, and they had big eyes.
But the children remained adamant, and they insisted they hadn't seen a plane or a helicopter or anything explainable. Basically, they hadn't invented the story. Something incredible and something real had happened in that field, and they desperately wanted the adults around them to believe them. Fortunately, the children's pleas didn't fall entirely on deaf ears. When the children got home, they recounted their experiences with their parents, and many took their children's consistent and emotional accounts seriously. And the following day, a concerned group of parents converged on the school to discuss the matter with the faculty. This is real. The parents showed up the next day. This is interesting. You gotta follow along. It's a really interesting, compelling sighting. Word of this event soon reached ZBC Radio, and through those broadcasts, it came to the attention of Cynthia Hind, our ufologist.
Did you all see something?
Yes.
The sheer number of witnesses, 62 children from various grades and backgrounds, all narrating essentially the same core event, lends the case significant weight. This is Jesus level stuff. That was a joke, by the way. It's also worth noting that not every child present on the playground that day claimed to have seen something, which argues against a simple case of everyone jumping on a bandwagon. So there were some contrarians, some children who just didn't see shit. You know, they're just like, I didn't see it. I didn't see any aliens, no, slick contemporary modern tight-skinned jumpsuit guy with big eyes. I mean, I would have loved to have seen it. That'd be me if I was there. I'd be digging a small hole, and then everything would have happened, and I'd see kids running, and I'd be like, okay, whatever, dude. I'm digging this small hole. I'm gonna end up in the Indian Ocean. And then they'd ask me, and I'd be like, no, I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. Not because I just didn't want to see anything, but because I was digging a small hole. Was this mass hysteria fueled by recent UFO reports? Or was it a childish prank that got out of hand? Or did these children, in the bright light of a Zimbabwean morning, genuinely encounter something beyond our current understanding and outside of our world? To explore this, we have to turn to the investigations that follow. But first, a commercial break. Let's be honest. When was the last time you needed to visit a doctor, but you just push it off because you're a dang goobers? You maybe made an excuse, it'll heal on its own. Or, I'm too busy to check this node out on my thyroid. We've all been there. You wake up with a mysterious rash or a persistent cough, and instead of getting proper care, you just don't. And you Google it, and then you get really scared and nervous for no reason. The thing is, you don't have to actually do that. You can use ZocDoc. You don't have to wait 6 months for an appointment. You can even get some same day using ZocDoc to link you with medical services. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click instantly to book an appointment. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 100,000 professionals across every specialty, from dental health to mental health to primary care to urgent care to I don't know. You can filter for doctors that take your insurance, ones that are located nearby or are a good fit for any medical need you might have. Once you find the right doctor, you can see their actual appointment openings and choose a time slot that works for you. Click instantly, book visit. They also happen very fast. You can typically get help within 24 to 72 hours of booking, and sometimes even same-day appointments. I use this service, and you should too. Stop putting off the doctor's appointment. Go to ZocDoc.com/Oompaville to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That is ZocDoc.com/Oompaville. Link in the description. Thank you for supporting the channel. In the days, weeks, and months that followed the Ariel School incident, 3 principal investigators took on the task of documenting the children's experiences, and each brought a unique perspective and methodology, and their collective efforts have made this one of the most thoroughly recorded UFO cases involving multiple witnesses in human history.
After looking at those, I definitely feel that they did see something.
What do you think that was?
I agree that it could be something that we are not common with.
First, we have Cynthia Hines. Cynthia, already distinguished as Zimbabwe's foremost UFO researcher, recognized the potential significance of the Ariel School reports immediately upon hearing about them. On September 20th, a mere 4 days after the alleged encounter, she was at the school learning, interviewing the kids, talking to them. Hey, what'd you see? How contemporary was this outfit? Did it look like what I'm wearing right now? No, I'm not fishing for compliments. I actually want to know about the aliens. That'd be me if I was a UFO researcher. I'd be fishing for compliments when interviewing people. Cynthia's deep experience and tenure as a documentarian of UFO phenomena across Africa made her uniquely suited for the investigation. She's quite literally the perfect person. She employed what she termed as the extended interview technique, which is a patient and persistent questioning style designed to help witnesses, especially children, recall details while being sensitive to cultural nuances in their interpretations.
It had a round top and it was flat like that around the sides.
What was around the side?
Just a, so like a platform coming down the side.
Did you see anything else?
Yes, we saw a black man running around.
Her approach at Ariel was systematic. She interviewed the children in small groups of 4 to 6, a method that some skeptics later criticized, suggesting it might have allowed for cross-contamination of stories as other children were permitted to listen in. So, you know, that could potentially muddy the well a little bit, but in spite of the critique, one of Hines' most invaluable contributions was having the children draw what they had witnessed. And the result of that, the collection of artwork, is a compelling visual record which shows a striking consistency in the depiction of disc-shaped or oval craft, often with domed tops or lights, and the small, black-clad, large-eyed beings were frequently drawn with thin limbs. They didn't hit the weights, all right? They were thin. They need to get on TRT like me. They need to get on that sauce, dude. Imagine if I was on steroids and I looked like this. During Hines' interviews, she noted a fascinating aspect. The children's diverse cultural backgrounds sometimes influence their interpretation of the beings. She reported some of the children identifying the figures as Takalashe entities from Shona and Ndebele folklore, rather than aliens in the Western sense. And this observation aligned with a broader pattern that Hines had identified in her African UFO research. While the core descriptions of phenomena often remained remarkably consistent across cultures, the labels and interpretations could vary significantly, with some witnesses viewing such entities as ancestral spirits or other figures from their own traditions. In her initial report, Hines was cautious but firm and said, "The children had seen something. I have no explanation for what it was they saw, but I believe, based on the consistency of their stories, that they had a genuine experience." The Ariel School encounter would become a cornerstone of Hines' 1997 book, UFOs Over Africa. It is a comprehensive 254-page volume published by Horace House Press, and this book was the culmination of her decades of meticulous investigation across the continent, which filled a significant void in global UFO research at the time. She's pretty renowned, to be honest. Beyond Ariel, Hines' book details other notable African cases, such as the La Rochelle estate case, which involved reports of a silvery-suited alien and unique light phenomena, always with the modern and contemporary fits. These aliens need to start shopping at Hot Topic. I don't know. Fuck, that's stupid. She also documented a complex abduction case involving 2 women in Johannesburg, which I might talk about that in another video because I've got the book, it's very interesting. A key argument in Hines' work, and one she felt lent particular credence to African UFO reports, was the general lack of prior exposure to UFO concepts within many of the local cultures. She said, "There is nothing in the African background or culture which explains or pertains to UFOs, so it would be difficult, if not impossible, for them to hallucinate or imagine an alien concept." This, she believed, made the consistency of the African children's accounts particularly suggestive of an objective underlying reality to the phenomena. It lent credence. Reality. Based. These kids were based as fuck. Now, on to Tim Leach, our BBC correspondent. The second key figure to investigate the Ariel claims was our boy, okay? Leach arrived at Ariel School on September 19th, just 3 days after the incident, to film interviews with pupils and staff for a BBC News report. Big black cock. As a seasoned journalist accustomed to covering war zones and complex political situations, Leach approached the story with a degree of professional skepticism, but what he encountered at Ariel profoundly affected him. He would later be quoted as saying, "Oh, I can handle war zones, but I could not handle this." I don't know why I made him British, but it is a disturbing nature of the children's testimony, and he seemed to believe all of them. Leach conducted his interviews independently of Hind, adhering to standard journalistic practices. The children he spoke to were unwavering in their descriptions, consistently rejecting suggestions that they might have misidentified a conventional aircraft like a helicopter or a weather balloon or whatever people always say it is. "Oh, it's just a weather balloon. It's just a I've never seen anything like that in my whole life. There's nothing I've ever seen where I'm like, oh, is that a UFO or is that a balloon? Huh? I see Starlink every now and then. I think that shit's aliens, but...
How do you know it was a spaceship? Wasn't it a helicopter or something like that?
Well, it looked like it was like a disc, like a round.
The resulting BBC footage that Leach captured showed the children's raw and immediate recollections, and it remains some of the most compelling contemporary evidence from the case. The third and perhaps most controversial investigator to arrive in Rua was Dr. John Mack, a Harvard University professor of psychiatry and a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. Mack visited Ariel School in November of 1994, approximately 2 months after the event. By the time of our event, Mack was already a prominent and contentious figure in UFO research. It was particularly centered around his work on the alien abduction phenomenon. He wrote a book called Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens and published it earlier that year. So he is academically exploring fringe science, UFO. Generally, people consider it nonsense, and his exploration of such extraordinary claims led to an internal review of his research methods by Harvard, but ultimately he retained his professorship at the school, so that's pretty impressive.
And what did he look like?
Well, he had big eyes that like pointed.
Pointed big eyes. Can you, maybe you could just draw the head. Do you like to draw?
Mack approached the Ariel children with a clinical and psychological lens. He conducted individual interviews, employing techniques aimed at minimizing suggestion and encouraging authentic recall. The sessions were typically more in-depth than those of Hind or Leach and often lasted 30 minutes or more per child. Bro just kept yapping. It was predominantly in Mack's interviews that the telepathic communication of environmental messages emerged as a strong theme, so that hadn't really been mentioned in Hind or Leach's interviews. This has led some skeptics to suggest that Mack, a known environmental advocate, might have inadvertently guided the children towards these specific narratives through his questioning. On the flip side, there are supporters of Mack who emphasize his methodology and psychiatric experience, along with his awareness of the dangers of leading questions. They say he would have been meticulous in his efforts to avoid influencing the recounting of the children, which that does make sense. And being investigated by Harvard, it's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive. Regardless, they saw aliens, for sure. All three people got the same, all that the same. So what if they added a little bit of environmentalism in it? Who cares? Doesn't make any damn difference to me, bud. Was they in black leotards or was they ain't? Reflecting on his investigation, Mack stated, "I was particularly impressed with the authenticity of the children's experiences. These children had no motive to make up such a story, and they seemed deeply, genuinely affected by what they had experienced. Several appeared to be struggling to find words to describe events beyond their frame of reference." And that, to me, is the most compelling thing. These children, some of them have no idea what aliens are. They've never seen, heard aliens, and they're all sharing the same exact story. It gives me goosebumps. I actually have goosebumps right now. That's really odd. I'm telling you, they're real. I'm telling you, they're real, man. I'm telling you, dude. So the investigations by Hind, Leach, and Mack, although conducted separately and employing different methodologies, all converged on a similar conclusion. The children of the Ariel School underwent a profound and, to them, very real experience that defied easy explanation. The chronology of the investigations is also noteworthy. Hind and Leach's arrival within days of the incident captured fresh, relatively uncontaminated accounts, while Mac's later more intensive interviews provided a bit of a deeper psychological insight into how the children were processing this event. Now, naturally, skeptics can point to potential methodological weaknesses in each investigation. Hines' group interviews, Leach's journalistic rather than paranormal investigator focus, and Mac's pre-existing professional interest in alien encounters. Sure, there's ways to undermine it, but the overall consistency of the children's core testimonies across these three distinctive investigative approaches gives this event, the Ariel School case, a resilience that, in my opinion, is impossible to dismiss. For example, if it were merely a product of mass hysteria or some kind of prank or whatever, there's no way that the story would stand up to such varied scrutiny. And it gets even better, too. What happens if they interview these people 30 years later? What happens then? Wait until we get to that part. It's wild. It's really wild. They re-interviewed a lot of these kids just a couple years ago, and it's crazy. But before we get to that, no matter how excited I am about all of this, we have to explore alternative, more conventional explanations of what potentially happened here. Several explanations have been proposed, ranging from psychological phenomena to misidentification and even outright just complete and utter unintentional fabrication. The most prominent skeptical theories are as follows. A, mass hysteria, also known as mass psychogenic illness or collective delusion, or crazy people being crazy. It is a well-documented psychological phenomenon that involves a group of people often under stress or in an excitable atmosphere experiencing similar physical symptoms or belief without an apparent physical cause. Psychologist Dr. Demobly Kokota, in a 2011 study on mass hysteria in African schools, specifically referenced the Ariel School incident as a potential example of such a thing. But it is worth noting that Kokota also observed that the children were found to not have much prior knowledge to UFOs, which complicates a straightforward mass hysteria explanation, because that is an important caveat. The hypothesis posits that in an environment already buzzing with UFO excitement from the sightings 2 days prior, one or more children might have misinterpreted a mundane event, and their ensuing fear or excitement rapidly spread through the group like some kind of plague. There are certain conditions that often precipitate mass hysteria. One is a pre-existing social atmosphere of excitement or anxiety, which in this case would have been the recent UFO reports. Two is a triggering event, perhaps a misidentified object or sound, maybe a helicopter, someone in the woods going, "Ah!" in a black leotard, I don't know. Three, the rapid spread of the belief or symptom through sight, sound, or direct communication. The fourth requirement for mass hysteria is a relatively isolated or close-knit group, which would have been the unsupervised children on a playground. The Ariel School scenario seems to fit several of these criteria. The children were momentarily isolated from adult authority, the air was thick with UFO talk, and children are known to be kind of dumb and suggestible. But in my opinion, applying the mass hysteria label to the Ariel event is not... Did I say areola event? The Ariel event is not straightforward. Several factors complicate the mass hysteria explanation. For example, not all children present reported seeing anything unusual. Mass hysteria often, though not always, results in a more widespread adoption of the delusion. Also, the detailed consistency of the core narrative over many years is atypical for mass hysteria, where accounts often evolve or fragment over time. And we'll get to that, by the way. It's incredible how consistent these recountings were. Mass hysteria episodes also usually dissipate relatively quickly once the group is dispersed or the perceived threat is removed. And in this event, many Ariel witnesses have maintained their accounts for decades. So, that's mass hysteria. What do you guys think? I'm not totally sure. Another common skeptical argument is simple misidentification. The children caught up in the UFO fervor might have seen something entirely ordinary, a uniquely shaped vehicle, maybe a Cadillac, a Pinto, potentially, or an unusual atmospheric effect, perhaps even an animal, a elephant. I don't know. What kind of creatures are in Zimbabwe? A lion! And maybe the children misinterpreted it through the lens of an alien visitation. I'm not sure how much I buy that, but one specific misidentification theory was proposed by researcher Oliver D. Smith, and it suggested that the children might have witnessed a dust devil, which is a swirling column of air and dust that is common in arid regions like Zimbabwe and Texas. I see them all the time. And from a distance, these things can appear as somewhat silver or white and move in erratic patterns that could potentially seem otherworldly to young, dumb children. That doesn't explain the modern, contemporary dressed, zoot suit aliens or whatever the beings themselves could potentially be explained by misperceived shadows or other children in the distance or even animals, or I'm not sure. All things leading to the distortion caused by the excitement and confusion of the moment for the children. It seems like bullshit. The big L for the misidentification theory is the telepathic messages and the consistency of those among the children that go beyond simply seeing a shape in the sky. You saw a shape, oh, it's an alien. Now, they got talked to by the holy relic. They're not gonna fall for that. Another skeptical line of thought is that the incident began as a prank or a shared imaginative game that escalated beyond the children's control. Children possess vivid imaginations, and one could conceive that a playful invention can become more real and there's an alien of craft. Would you see an alien of craft? It's right there, don't you see it? Ah! This theory gained renewed traction in 2023 with the release of a Netflix documentary called Encounters, and the series featured an interview with Dallin, a former Ariel student who claimed he had essentially initiated the event by pointing to a shiny rock in the distance and telling his classmates it was a UFO, which he never anticipated his claim would be taken so seriously or spread so widely. So there is that, but even that recent assertion is not without its own complications. Other witnesses have modernly contested his version of events. Dallin's 2023 account appears to directly contradict an on-camera statement he reportedly made 15 years prior in 2008, where he described the UFO with more elaborate details.
The lights in the sky, they were really, really amazing. The fact that they were moving at very, very high speeds, like so fast that you couldn't see them moving. It was like they would flash and then they would move so fast and cover a very large distance and then flash again and then move off again. But there wasn't one color, it was multiple colors.
Which is way different than saying it was a shiny rock. Unless he just couldn't live with the guilt anymore of lying to everybody. This guy's unreliable though. So the prank hypothesis, kind of makes a little bit of sense, but the sheer number of children who also consistently maintained a story over years, and not just among themselves, but through multiple separate interviews with adult investigators, that would be a very complex fabrication, especially under direct questioning so consistently. Now, there's a more recent and somewhat unconventional skeptical theory. It was proposed by researcher Gideon Reed in 2022. This theory posits that the children may have conflated their memories of a touring puppet show, possibly one designed to promote AIDS awareness back in those days, with a UFO encounter. You see, in the early 1990s, public health initiatives in Zimbabwe and other African nations sometimes employed puppet shows to educate children on topics like HIV and AIDS. And the performers could feature unusual characters, and they often conveyed messages about human behavior and its consequences. There's some superficial resemblance to the environmental warnings that the children of Ariel reported. This theory tries to address the visual element, the unusual beings, and the message component, but what about the craft? They don't usually do aliens as the beings for puppet designs, and overall the context of the sighting was occurring during a mid-morning break with a fence and area. It's funny, it's interesting, but to me, it seems like bullshit. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I just like Alien a lot, big time Alien guy. Love Alien dudes. So we have plenty of skeptical theories, and some of them make sense, some of them make less sense, but the most challenging aspect for any of these single skeptical theories is explaining the enduring conviction of so many witnesses who maintained remarkably consistent accounts not only in the immediate aftermath, but, for many, into their adult lives. And these people often reported ongoing psychological and emotional impacts from their experience that they had on that fateful day back in 1994. Now, of course, false memories, all this stuff, there's plenty of endless circle jerking you can get into, but the point is, the consistency of these testimonies is unlike any other alien encounter I've ever heard of before in my lifetime. So, what has been the lasting legacy of the Ariel School incident? Several former Ariel School students have continued to affirm their accounts publicly into adulthood, sharing how the experience has shaped their lives.
But it was a silver object that was in the sky, and we're both like looking at it. And I only saw it for possibly a few seconds, and it seemed to move off a bit and then suddenly vanished.
In 2014, 20 years after the event, the South African newspaper Mail and Guardian interviewed one witness who confessed to a lingering fear that the beings might return, claiming she could sense when they are back in the atmosphere. Emily Trim, another witness, exhibited a series of paintings in 2016 that she described as manifestation of the messages that she received from the beings that day.
I ended a relationship. I was engaged for 6 years. You know, this whole topic definitely weighed on our relationship.
Her artwork is filled with vivid, sometimes unsettling imagery which she directly attributes to her encounter. Sadly, she passed away in November of 2023. Barstool sports writer Za, whose real name is Liesel Trollspoinget, also was a former Ariel pupil. He spoke about his experience in a 2021 interview recounting the bright light descending from the sky and the emergence of alien, extremely well-dressed figures, with his adult testimony echoing his childhood account. Many witnesses were also featured in the 2020 documentary The Phenomenon, directed by James Fox. In the film, they discussed the profound and lasting effects the experience has had on them, including recurring dreams for some and a heightened sense of environmental responsibility for others. Imagine that, you're just like a good person because the aliens talk to you. But why just 30 kids? 62 children. Why 62 children 30 years ago in a small school at a rural, like, what's the end game? Have any of them gone on to become great members of society? Like, what is the purpose of showing yourself as an alien? You're just like, there's some kids down there, you want to stop off and fuck with them? Want to stop down there and fuck with some kids? Because we love doing that. We're aliens. And they're like, or whatever aliens do. So remarkably, even with the passage of nearly 3 decades, the central narrative shared by many adult witnesses aligns closely with their childhood accounts. This is a hallmark of a genuine, deeply impactful event, and not just a fleeting childhood fantasy or some kind of, easily disproven false memory or whatever. Now, within the field of UFO research, the Ariel School incident holds a prominent legendary status. Jerome Clark, a highly respected Fortean writer and UFO historian, has dubbed it the most remarkable close encounter of the third kind in the 1990s. It consistently appears in compilations of the most compelling UFO cases and is frequently cited by ufologists as potent evidence suggestive of extraterrestrial visitation. It's a crazy story. On the whole, there's several factors that contribute to the significance for researchers. There's an unusually large number of witnesses, 62 children, the consistency of their accounts, especially when interviewed by different investigators, the young age of the witnesses, which children are often considered less prone to complex, sustained fabrication than adults. Also, the detailed descriptions of the craft and the alleged beings, plus the reported telepathic communications, particularly environmental themes that were conveyed. Very interesting stuff. And finally, the argument notably made by Cynthia Hind that many of the children lacked significant prior exposure to specific UFO tropes from Western media, which made their detailed and shared descriptions harder to explain as simple cultural contamination. This case has particularly been influential for researchers focusing on the experiencer aspect of UFO encounters, those who study not just sightings of anomalous craft, but also alleged interactions and communications with non-human intelligence. The environmental messages reportedly received by the Ariel children resonate with similar themes reported in other close encounter cases globally, where witnesses claim to have received warnings or insight about humanity's stewardship of the Earth and the terrible job we do, apparently. There's a massive theory that aliens are going to intervene if we don't stop up the planet, or if we use nukes, they'll intervene. There's a lot of stories of nuclear bombs, like, oh, we're about to launch a nuclear bomb, it's the Cold War, and then an alien comes in and is just like, yep, like Frankie McDonald eating a fake hot dog, something. I'm not really sure, but it seems like they don't want us to blow up our planet. So after sifting through the layers of evidence, the poignant testimonies, and the inherent contradictions of the Ariel School incident, we are inevitably left with more questions than definitive answers. Perhaps this is fitting for an event that resides at the complex intersection of child psychology, collective memory, cultural interpretation, and just potentially humanity's place in a larger cosmos. Everybody's always wondering about that. Well, I guess not everybody, but people seem to wonder about that occasionally. What happened on that September morning in 1994 remains an enigma, shrouded in an ambiguity that mirrors the UFO phenomenon at large. The case presents elements that seem to defy conventional terrestrial explanations, yet it also poses challenges to a straightforward extraterrestrial interpretation. For those inclined towards skepticism, the Ariel incident serves as a potent example of the stupidity of children. And for us believers, it stands as exceptionally compelling evidence that we are not alone and that non-human intelligences may indeed be observing our world. Kind of like this. I'm watching you. Or even this. I mean, this guy's been observing you this entire time. So the real question is, what if those 62 children in their innocence and candor genuinely did witness something beyond our ordinary experience on that fateful day? What if, for reasons unknown, very unknown, non-human entities chose a random-ass school playground in rural Zimbabwe as a point of contact rather than the halls of power or scientific institution, the White House maybe? If that is the case, what might such a choice imply about us, about them, or about our potential place in the universe? Teeming with possibilities. I have no idea. And also, what about this message that they communicated about? Recycling? Nah. Hey, but how about this, alien fellas? Not interested. How about this? Put that in your pipe and smoke it. I'm just kidding, by the way. I'm just joking around. Anyways, thank you all for watching this Oompaville video about the Ariel School alien encounter incident, part 75. If you enjoyed, press the like button down below, hit the subscribe button if you're new, go to the Gump Club to watch behind the scenes footage and other versions of this video. Got our sources down below if you want to read up on it on your own time. Also, leave some suggestions of what you might want to see in a future video down below. I will see you guys in the next video.